This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting from the beautiful hill country of Texas. Okay, today's interview, buckle up, Buttercup. I'm interviewing the great David Bereit, founder of 40 Days for Life. Just recently, he launched the Life Beyond Roe webcast with almost 50 pro-life leaders, where they each speak for about 3 minutes on where the pro-life movement is headed and what we should do next. But what is David Bereit known for? He's known for founding 40 Days for Life. And I had the privilege of being at the very first 40 Days for Life when it was in College Station, Texas. Now, I was there just as a participant. I happened to be in town for an event. I was director of American Life League's youth department at the time in Rock for Life. We were promoting our National Pro-Life T-shirt Day, which, is still going on. This was only our second year. But I was in College Station for that National Pro-Life T-shirt Day. And I just tagged along with David Bereit and his staff and participated in the very first 40 Days for Life. And they never had plans for going national or anything at the time. But for me, just to be there and look at them, and as it was happening, I remembered at the time knowing this was the beginning of something very big. And I was just so grateful to be there with them and watch them as they were launching something that was quite beautiful and transformative. And I cannot think of any other initiative, any other single initiative. The Pregnancy Center movement, of course, has saved so many lives over the past 50 years. But I cannot think of any other single initiative that probably has saved more lives than 40 Days for Life. And it was started by a handful of people in Texas less than 20 years ago. So we're going to hear all about the founding of 40 Days for Life and its impact in the United States and around the world. And also we're going to talk to David about Life Beyond Roe. So let's get on with the interview. This episode is being brought to you by Epic Times. You need to go to Epic Times. That needs to be where you start your day. Go to ireadepoch.com. Use the code Jason Jones, and you get your first month for $1. When you use the code Jason Jones, you get your subscription for the year. For $77. It is the best newspaper in the world. It is number 4 in the country right now, but it is headed to number 1, and you need to subscribe today. Also, this episode is being brought to you by MyPillow.com. Go to MyPillow.com, use the code Jones. You're going to get great discounts on everything. Slippers right now, cheaper than ever. Go to MyPillow.com, use the code Jones. And as always, this episode is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project, standing in solidarity with the most vulnerable people in the world when it is most challenging. Go to thegreatcampaign.org and become a monthly donor. Give your best one-time gift, but if you can, make a monthly gift as well. We need those monthly gifts to sustain our work. So let's get on with the interview with the legendary David Bereit on The Jason Jones Show. David Bereit, welcome to The Jason Jones Show.
Oh, my goodness, Jason, I have been so looking forward to this, being on the #1 podcast in the Jones family. It's amazing.
It's the #1 podcast in my neighborhood. I can't confirm that. I cannot actually confirm that. But that's what your family tells you. Potentially, I don't know. I mean, as far as I know, it's the #1 podcast. I will say this, it's the #1 podcast in the world that formerly broadcasted from the west side of Oahu, but now broadcasts from the hill country of Texas. This is as big as it gets.
Man, and here I am getting to be a guest on this epic show. I'm excited.
Well, I mean, I made you, David Bereit.
Hey, Hey, we have been in this together for a long time, and I actually, you have played a major influential role, but I don't want you to get a big swelled head, so we got to kind of bring you down a little bit.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, let me tell you, because before we talked, it's clear that you have never, ever listened to a single episode of the Jason Jones Show. I could tell by the questions you were asking me, you barely knew I had a podcast. Have you been on?
This is a podcast?
This is a podcast. You thought it was just a phone call?
Oh, is that what I showed up for? I had no idea you had one.
You thought we were just talking. Well, by the way, you're the hardest guy to reach in the world. Carter Snead is number 2 of Notre Dame's Center for Ethics and Culture, Ethics and Public Policy. I don't know. But he's number 2. You're number 1.
Wow. I see. You're the number 1 podcast, and I'm the number 1 hardest to reach guy. We both have bragging rights.
Yeah, so let me tell you what's going on, seeing you have no clue of what's going on here.
Okay.
So this is the Jason Jones Show. It's a podcast. And because, as you know, I've been in this movement now for 33 years. And I'm kind of friends with everyone in the movement, or at least I like everyone in the movement, and they don't shun me too bad. So I thought I'm uniquely positioned to interview my friends. And so we're doing 49 shows in 49 days. It'll probably be over 100 hours of podcasts in less than 2 months, talking to some of the greatest activists in the history of this republic who've been advocating for human dignity. And we're also going to talk to some folks that disagree with us over the next couple of weeks. This is like episode 15, I think. This is day 15 of our, I think. Who knows? It is day 15 of our 49 days in a row. So, David, you and I, what's interesting is I feel like we've been friends for not that long, because in the pro-life movement, I've only known you 20 years, so you're kind of my new friend.
Well, I'm still a little wet behind the ears, but, I have known you since I first got involved in the pro-life movement within a very short period of time.
Is that true?
I am not, old school like you.
No, is that true? I felt like when I met you that you were seasoned professional. So do you want to tell the story of how we met? So the reason you were on this show,
okay.
Let me tell you, is together with me, you founded 40 Days for Life.
No, you founded it.
Okay.
I just rode your coattails.
Okay. Well, people listening, we're kidding. But I was kind of there, like Forrest Gump, right? I was kind of there for the first 40 Days for Life. And you're the witness to this. I watched you, and I watched your organization, what you and your team did, and I was in awe at the professionalism, the discipline. There was just something very unique about what you were doing at that very first 40 Days for Life, which I don't know what your vision was at the time, but I remember looking at this and saying, this can be like modeled and franchise, like a franchise, and taught and spread around the world. And I took you aside, didn't I? The very first 40 Days for Life, said, what did I say?
You said this needs to be happening in every city all across America and around the world. And you were the first person to ever have that vision beyond. And do I need to send you some royalty checks or something?
You just save babies. Just give me some of that credit in heaven. So what it was is, it's obviously I saw sidewalk counseling before, and I saw peaceful, prayerful events in front of in front of abortion clinics before. But there was just something unique about you, and I guess the skill sets you had in the industry that you were raised up in as a young professional. I don't know what it was, but it was a professionalism. And I remember thinking, this is very unique, and I could see this happening in cities. And in my mind, I remember saying to you, if you spread this around the country, I'm going to go to every single one. And you probably don't remember this. The second one was in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
I do remember that.
Do you know I flew to be at that one? I don't think you were there the days I was there.
I did not know that. I never went to that one during the time it was happening.
I flew with my children, my 2 oldest children. We flew there because I just knew it was something historic. But historic, I thought, man, there's going to be a day where they're in 40 cities. How many cities? I mean, to me, that would have been just unimaginable. Just a dream. But
right.
Now, I know you've moved on. You founded this great organization, and now it's being run by Sean Carney. But do you know, what are the latest numbers? How many cities is 40 Days for Life operating?
The last I saw was over 800 cities across America and something like 60 nations. And that's, to God be the glory, and to Jason Jones be the credit, because he had the vision for this. Can I just go back a second and just add a little context to what you just shared, because I think it's important for the person listening right now. Okay, so my background prior to the pro-life movement is I had a degree in biomedical science, and I ended up working in the pharmaceutical industry. So I was a drug dealer, but it was all legal. I was working as a pharmaceutical rep, calling on doctors in about an hour radius of where I lived in College Station, Texas, and Planned Parenthood opened that abortion facility in College Station. And that was what really propelled me into the pro-life movement. My wife had grown up in a pro-life family that was always out praying outside abortion facilities in Corpus Christi, Texas. And she said, David, we need to get involved. And so we got involved with the local effort that came about as a result of that facility opening. It was run by a young church secretary at the time. Her name was Lauren Gouldy, wonderful dear friend, visionary leader, and she set up a group called the Coalition for Life. So that was my first introduction to pro-life efforts. And
What year was that? What year was that?
Yeah, the news about Planned Parenthood opening was 1998. They opened the facility in 1999, and then I quit my job in the pharmaceutical industry to dive in full-time in 2001, and then you and I met in 2004. So that just gives you a few kind of like benchmarks of when things happen.
Yeah. So we met at the American Life League event first, the Rock for Life event first.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We met at that event first, and then you came to College Station. You spoke at our banquet, and then went out and participated in the 40 Days for Life, and that was when you had that vision, that idea, and you shared it with me and said, this should be everywhere. And I was like, are you kidding? We can barely keep this afloat in our own town. But then that came true. And ultimately, we recognized we felt the call of the Holy Spirit and responded and did the best we could to grow it, and it continues to grow to this day. And we couldn't stop it if we tried. It's amazing.
Well, I thank God for the privilege. Yeah, I just thank God for the privilege. I remember sitting out there in the rain, and I think there were three of us, you, Sean, and a young woman. I think she passed away. I don't remember her name, but there was a young woman. She battled cancer, I think. Am I getting that right? Maybe I'm missing.
I don't recall that part of the story. I don't remember that.
Okay, but there was three of us, and there was me and then three of you. There was Sean, a young woman, and you. And I walked away from you guys in the rain. Do you remember the rain?
Yep.
And I walked away and I looked at you guys, and I remember thinking, Lord, what a privilege that I get to see this right now. What a privilege. I just knew. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, but you had a belief and a vision before I did, before anybody else did. And, I really, during those 40 days, from, that campaign that you were a part of was the result of an hour of prayer. So I had a conversation with a friend at my house one evening, and he was saying, we need to do more to save children, to protect mothers. And he said, why don't we do something really crazy, like go out there 24 hours a day and pray outside and be there as a witness and help those who are going in to find other alternatives. I thought he was crazy, but I couldn't sleep that night. And I went into the office of the Coalition for Life. I was running the organization at the time. I was the executive director. And I shared that with the staff. And we prayed around the wooden table, the conference table in the middle of that office. And that was where the vision of 40 Days for Life came from. And we said, okay, 40 days of prayer and fasting, 40 days of community outreach, 40 days of peaceful vigil. And 2 weeks later, we launched that first 40 days that you were a part of. So it came from prayer, and it was a move of people of faith. So 1,000 people participated in that inaugural local campaign. And at the end of the year, when the Texas Department of Health reported abortion numbers by county, Brazos County, the county that we were in, saw a 28% reduction in the number of abortions year to year.
Unbelievable.
So over 100 lives were saved because people showed up and they lived out their faith. So, it's really, when I think about all of the progress of the pro-life movement, and 40 Days for Life is just one tiny part of this greater pro-life movement, and then that's part of a greater move of where God is working in our culture today. But it really comes down to God's people putting their faith into action together. And you've been an example of that in all the amazing work, Jason, that you have done. And I am a huge fan of your work. And I'm not just saying that because I'm here on the Jason Jones Show, but I continue to cheer on and champion your work and have brought you in as a speaker even now that I'm in Virginia, et cetera. So this is our opportunity. If we believe that human life is sacred, we recognize there are vulnerable people at risk all around our world. We have to take our convictions, put them into action, combined with other people, and we can do amazing things, and we can change the world for good. And that's the hope that you give.
Your friends changed.
We all have.
You and your friends changed the world. I mean, it's just really unbelievable. Saved more lives than probably any other initiative since Roe versus Wade. And it was just how many years ago? It's not even 20 years ago from the first one. It was 18 years. Has it been 18 years?
The first local campaign was in 2004. The first national campaign was in 2007. So it's only been, as a movement, it's only been happening for 15 years, and 21,989 lives have been saved that we know of. There are probably many more beyond that.
So I want to walk through your thought process is going from a guy with a great job and then jettisoning that in the early 2000s when the pro-life movement was still fledgling. It was still, there were a few very large organizations. There seemed to be no breathing room for small organizations to grow up. And it was before the birth of social media, which kind of changed everything. And, yesterday on the show, I interviewed Victoria Robinson on the post-abortion healing movement. And I probably sounded pretty brutal, but I was just being honest that I have a hard time, and I'm not saying I'm right. I just have a very hard time having empathy for men who, of course, women to have abortions and later regret it. And I know that's just a hardness in my heart. And I get that. And one of my great frustrations is that post-abortive men don't step up more. But, stepping up is hard. And you're not a post-abortive man, but here you were. You had no history in the pro-life movement. Your wife, Margaret, grew up in a family that was active in the pro-life movement. And now you're going from 0 to 60 because praying in front of an abortion clinic is about the hardest thing you can do in the pro-life movement, right? Mm-hmm. Or I shouldn't say the hardest. It's the most intimidating place to start, I would guess. So what was going on? Like, were you nervous? Were you insecure? Were you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, but I mean, here's where I was. I was a person who suffered from a low self-esteem. I was somebody who had never led anything. I was somebody who had never done anything that was faith forward other than go to church and, pray, that sort of thing. I was somebody that had never been involved in the pro-life movement. I felt absolutely like I had nothing to offer. But I kept having that still small voice that was telling me, you have a role. And that still small voice may be speaking to the person listening to us right now, saying, you have a role. But for me, I started to say, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. I don't have any discernible skills here. I don't know what to do or how to do it. But what I started to recognize is that every one of us has some gift, some skill, something that we can bring to bear. So for me, I had a background in sales and marketing. I had a degree in science, but I had been working in sales and marketing since I graduated from school at Texas A&M. So I started to say, okay, if I'm going to get involved in the pro-life movement, what can I do? Well, I can bring my experience at influencing people and trying to set goals and achieve those goals and work towards those. And so when I quit my job, I had to very quickly determine, okay, what are we trying to accomplish in our community? And in our community, it was we're trying to end abortion in our community. Peacefully, certainly, prayerfully, yes, but we're trying to end it. So we looked and said, where are we? Point A. Where do we want to go? Point B. And then what are the mile markers between those two different points? So point A, there were about 500 some odd abortions being done a year in our community. They were all being done at Planned Parenthood. We looked at that facility and said, okay, how do we influence that and move those numbers down to the point where that facility can no longer financially survive And then we started to say, okay, if the goal is for that facility to close, for no abortions to be committed there, and obviously then the next step is to keep people from leaving the county and going elsewhere for abortions. But that was step 2. But step 1, we looked and said, okay, what do we need to influence? Well, we need to cut into their revenue stream. So Planned Parenthood at that point in time had about a third of their revenue coming from taxpayer funding in the state of Texas. About a third of it was coming from customer traffic. About a third of it was coming from donated money, grants, foundations, etc. So we actually mapped out strategies. We reverse engineered it and said, how do we move towards stripping away the taxpayer funding? And of course, Texas was the first to pass a law, thanks to our state senator in our community, Steve Ogden, who was the finance committee chair, and he put the first measure to defund Planned Parenthood, to my knowledge, in the United States. It passed, it was signed into law at that time by Governor Rick Perry, challenged in the Fifth Circuit Court, went up there and then went back and forth 3 or 4 times, and eventually Texas was able to defund Planned Parenthood. So we worked on a strategy there. Secondly, we were working on a strategy of how do we get rid of some of the donated money? Well, a lot of it was to help people realize what Planned Parenthood was, the harm that they were doing to women, to harm they were doing to children in our local schools. As we began to stigmatize Planned Parenthood for the awful things they were doing, and their donations started to drop. And then for the customer traffic, that's what you experienced out there in the rain outside of Planned Parenthood. We said, if we are out there present, when Abby Johnson had her conversion and left the abortion industry, she came and reported that at the last Planned Parenthood national convention she had been at prior to her conversion, they had reported that when people are praying and sidewalk counseling outside of abortion facilities, the no-show rate can be as high as 75%. So that's a way we can drive down the customer revenue. So we deployed all of those different things. Again, it was just like, where do we want to go? Where are we now? What do we need to do to get there? Some of those things were not as successful as quickly as we hoped, but collectively they put enough pressure in enough places that eventually, then we launched the 40 Days for Life. Eventually, after 13 40 Days for Life campaigns outside that facility's doors, and it had by that point spread all over America and was spreading internationally, that was when finally Texas, the final straw, passed the defund measure of Planned Parenthood, and that facility closed its doors and went out of business. So, for me, Jason, to answer your question, long answer to a short question, but it's discern your gifts, find a way that you can use them, and do it strategically, and you never know what amazing things you can accomplish. I had a background in sales, marketing, goal setting. Those are the things I deployed. Other people may have gifts and skills in how do I help somebody in a time of need. I'm a great shoulder to lean on. I'm somebody that people can count on. Maybe you're supposed to work in pregnancy help. Maybe you're supposed to work like Victoria in post-abortion healing, or maybe you've been through the pain of an abortion and your objective is to help others avoid the pain that you went through. Find your place, discern your gifts and skills, put them into action strategically, and together we can all make a tremendous difference.
No, you're right, David. And when I was in college, I remember after leaving graduate school to go to Washington, D.C. from Hawaii, I was so excited to get to D.C. because I always imagined that in these large pro-life organizations, there were these geniuses with all the resources in the world that were marching us to victory. But that's not really what happened.
Right.
Not that there aren't geniuses in the pro-life organization, major, very large pro-life organizations that had a big part in our success, in the success of the pro-life movement. But most of the great successes came from a homeschool girl a young homeschool girl in California who worked for the wild Mark Crutcher in Texas. 40 Days for Life, coming out of College Station, all these little organizations that sprouted up as local initiatives that then spread all over the world.
Well, and I think that's the point we need to really underscore, Jason, because here we are now in a post-Roe America, and I presume everybody knows this, but just in case, abortion has not ended. I know you would think it had by all the sky is falling predictions on the media. Abortion hasn't ended. Simply, the overturn of Roe means that the decision goes back to the American people through their elected officials in the states and in Congress. And so all of a sudden, we now have 50 battlegrounds, 50 different states. Now, we have more ability to influence change than when unelected judges held that completely to themselves. But in some states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, California, things are going to be harder before they get better, but there's more ability to influence change. In some places where you live, in Texas, where I used to live, places like Florida, there are other places that things are going to be better, but there's still a lot of work to do. And then you've got all these middle kind of battleground states where it's going to be, a free-for-all, Michigan and other places where it's just everything's up for grabs. So the innovations that we need at this crucial moment, those are the ones that have not yet been deployed. And it may be you listening right now, and you go, a crazy guy like Bereit, a crazy guy like Jones, they were able to do their part up to this point. I've got something burning on my heart. I'm heartbroken about children dying, about women being wounded, and I see opportunities. Take your idea and put it into action. That may be the next huge breakthrough that the entire pro-life movement is pointing to and saying that was what was needed to go after the fall of Roe to start closing down abortion state by state by state. This is a moment that needs the best that we have to offer. The best innovation, the best work, the best people, and we need to bring our best solutions because children are still at risk, women are still at risk, families are still at risk. So find your place, bring your best, and together we can save more lives than ever before.
Yeah, and don't let anyone tell you can't do it, right? Because that's what's going to happen. When you come up with an innovative idea, people are going to go, that can't happen. I remember when David Daleiden called me when he was raising money for what he was trying to do. Now, I didn't tell him that he was not going to succeed. I just said, I don't have the bandwidth for that. I wish you luck. You're a brave young man, something like that. But in my mind, I thought his ambition is too big. Like, he's not going to be able to pull it off. But I have learned not to tell people they can't pull things off because they do. Just because I can't see it, the tallest mountain I have seen is not the tallest mountain in the world. And you have a vision for something, make it happen. When I told people I was going to make pro-life movies, they laughed at me. That were mainstream and had big actors, they laughed at me. They'll still laugh at me, and I'm like, and when I did it, and I said, I'm going to do it again. Though, you're not going to do it again. Yeah, no, I'm going to do it again. And then you just have, you lucked out those other times, but the next movie you're not going to be so lucky. But you could keep doing it, right? And you think of all the great innovations. What was the major obstacle that you had to face to taking 40 Days for Life, national and international? Did you ever want to quit, or did people say this isn't going to work? Or
yeah, I mean, I'll answer that on two fronts. So front one was just internal resistance. It's doubt, fear, worry. What are people going to think? Will this work? So after you witnessed that first 40 Days for Life campaign, I was recruited and I went to work. You had worked there previous to me at American Life League. And so for 2 years, I worked at one of those national organizations. I was receiving a comfortable salary. I was working for a established organization that had a budget. And so to start 40 Days for Life as its own initiative, I had to take a leap of faith. I was terrified. I didn't know if I could pull this off. I had run a local organization. I had gone to work for a national organization. I had never started an organization. So I was completely taking a blank sheet of paper and saying, gee, let's create something. So there was that fear, and then the worry of like, how am I going to make this work? And the way it worked, and then I'll address this from another angle as well, but the way it worked is I sent a letter to 20 families back in Texas, people who had been a part of the first 40 Days for Life campaign. I said, you saw what happened. We feel there's an opportunity to spread this beyond. Some crazy guy named Jason Jones told us that. I don't know. We'll see. And
you shouldn't have dropped my name. You shouldn't have dropped my name. You should have used another name.
I didn't drop your name. That's why,
Okay.
Everything worked out great because,
Exactly.
it would have been a little bit off-putting at that point. They would have been like, whoa, the Jason Jones. But I said, if you want to see what happened in our town spread elsewhere, my family is willing to basically be missionaries for a year, but we need your support. And of those 20 letters I sent out, 11 families carried my family for a full year as missionaries, very sacrificially. And believe me, it was not a robust amount of money.
As a man, that had to be really hard to your ego.
Well, it was because, I'm like an entrepreneur. I like to go build things. I like to go perform. But I had to humble myself and say, this is not about me. This is about God. This is about the children at risk. This is about the mothers at risk. So if this needs to happen, nobody else is doing it. I have skills and talents that can help bring this to reality. Then I need to step out and do it. Now, I'm internally just really struggling and resisting this. So that was like, it was that internal resistance. But by the grace of God, those 11 families carried us for a year. At the end of that year, let me finish that, and then I'll shift to one last thought on this. But at the end of that year, 40 Days for Life had $71 in our bank account. I was the only employee for the whole first year. Nobody else worked there. And at the end of that year, I hadn't been paid in 10 weeks because all that missionary support had run out. So I realized this is a do or die moment. Either this was meant to happen twice and that's it, or it's meant to continue. So I sent out an email to all the 40 Days for Life participants. And at that point, we maybe had 30,000 people on our email list, something like that. And I invited them onto it. At the time, there wasn't Zoom meetings. I invited them onto a conference call, a glorified, conference call. We had the audio piped out to the web. That was super advanced at that point. And I said, we're going to tell you what you've accomplished through your prayers and efforts over this last year, where we're at, where we think we're supposed to go, and what it's going to take to get there. And something like 2,000 people show up on this glorified conference call. So I shared, here's what your prayers and efforts did over this first year, how many lives have been saved, how many clinics have closed, how many workers have had a change of heart and left the abortion industry. We feel that based on your feedback and everything else that we're supposed to expand this both domestically and also internationally. However, we have $71 in the bank. I've not been paid in 10 weeks. And either that has to immediately be resolved, or we just recognize this is the end. We close the door and we say, thank you very much, God, for what you did. And we move on. And people gave Jason $141,000 in 72 hours because they wanted that mission to continue. And that was when I knew this has lasting staying power. This is really what Jason Jones had predicted it would be. It's going to spread. And that's how it started to grow. So the resistance, that internal resistance, the external resistance was exactly what you said earlier. Going out and standing up for life in front of abortion facilities is hard. It's hard to recruit people to do it. It's hard to recruit leaders to do it. It's hard to get pastors and clergy involved. It's hard to get those big national organizations that they know how to do all of these things, that this is new and different, that like, oh, this is disruptive. Like, it was just, there was a lot of resistance externally. And so we just had to know in our heart, we felt this was a call from God. We felt and we saw the track record of success that it was having. And we just said, we have to do this even if there's external resistance, both from the pro-life movement and also certainly from the abortion industry. Planned Parenthood was calling us 40 days of harassment, and the ACLU was saying that 40 Days for Life was the single greatest threat to choice in the United States. And so again, we took that as a badge of honor. But from the internal, the pro-life movement, that kind of resistance was hard. But that's the point. Jason, you've done some crazy things that people said, that can't work, that'll never happen. Oh, Jason Jones, he's crazy, just like they say about David Bereit. But you've done it. You've made those movies. You've launched the Vulnerable Peoples Project. You've launched Movie to Movement. You've done all these amazing things. It's because you took the convictions that God put on your heart and you put them into action. And that's what every person listening needs to do as well.
Well, thank you for those nice words. The key for me has been, I realized I have no talent, and so if I fail, no one's going to be surprised. So just with reckless abandon, be shameless and charge towards the goal. That's a
great perspective.
That's where I'm coming from. No, when I was an atheist, I think I told you the story before where we were trying to get, I was director of Hawaii Right to Life. This was 1999. We were working getting a partial birth abortion ban, but we couldn't even get it through committee. And I was just so frustrated, and I was an atheist, and I called Ambassador Alan Keyes. So I got to put his name down. I got to get him on these 49 days. I called Ambassador Alan Keyes. I said, Dr. Keyes, I'm chairman of the Young Republicans, chief of staff for a state representative. I have a radio show with the mayor and a state representative, and director of Hawaii Right to Life. And I can't even get one bill through committee. I'm wasting my life. And he said, the darker the world becomes, the further your light will shine. Just pray. And so I prayed, and my prayer was for rich people, famous people, and powerful people. That was my prayer. And as I look, and I said, God, if you're out there, raise these people up and allow me to serve them, because I'm not bringing anything to the table. And the people I'm working with, they're great, but most of them are like 90. My Right to Life team, they were ladies who'd been fighting abortion since before Roe v. Wade, for real. That was my team.
Wow.
And, but then I met you, I met Eduardo Verastegui, you meet people like Jim Caviezel, and all of a sudden, it seems like in the past 20 years, just the major donors showed up, people with fame and celebrity have showed up, and they've taken great risks to stand for life, as it took when Eduardo made Bella, or when someone like Benjamin Watson makes Divided Hearts of America. They have a lot to lose. I have nothing to lose. I always tell them that when we make the project. I say, look, there's no skin off my back, but you guys are risking a lot. And you sacrificed and risked a lot to leave a profession, a lucrative profession, and at a time when I think it was growing as an industry and booming. And but look at what happened. You created the most, when the history books are written, and that's why I'm doing this, because I thought in 100 years, how great would it be to have an archive of 49 interviews of these folks that people can delve into and listen to all in one place. And 40 Days for Life is going to be in books written 100 years from now. If they write books, maybe it'll just be put into the metaverse. You'll just upload it into your Neuralink. I don't know how.
Put on your meta goggles.
Yeah, it's something that streams from your brain, from your meta goggles directly into your brain. However, they're going to be receiving information when they're researching how the laws changed on abortion in the United States. 40 Days for Life is going to be a big part. It'll be a big part of that. But your goal wasn't legislative, was it? It was just simply, let's close the abortion clinics in our community. But then it led to legislative and electoral success. How does that work together?
Yeah, I never felt called on the front end to directly involve myself in the political and legislative. I know it's a crucial part. I just didn't feel it was my gifting and strength. But I realized that it's kind of like the many parts of the body of Christ. We've got the many parts of the pro-life movement. So when you've got the people like Marjorie Dana-Felser out there on the political front, when you've got the Catherine Glenn Foster and Steve Aiden at Americans United for Life, when you've got all the different people in the political and the legislative, and you've got all these people, they're doing great work. I was like, I don't need to reinvent that wheel because I don't really know that space well. But what if we got hundreds of thousands of people praying and taking action to save lives? That's going to both form them to be better citizens as they exercise their civic duties in voting and supporting good legislation and opposing bad legislation. But also, I know it's going to have a ripple effect. All those prayers get channeled into what God wants to accomplish in all these different facets of the movement. So I was just 2 days before the Dobbs decision dropped and Roe was overturned, I was in Sacramento, California, and I was speaking at the last March for Life anywhere in America prior to the overturn of Roe. It was the California March for Life. And there were over 1,000 people there in Sacramento. It was 102 degrees. We were all sweating. I was the only one foolish enough to wear a suit and tie. And I'm like, why did I do this? But that day, after I spoke, a senator, California state senator, got up and spoke. And she was the first woman veteran that had been elected to the California Senate. And she did an amazing job. And afterwards, she comes over to me and she said, thank you so much for what you did with 40 Days for Life. The people in my community praying had a major influence on me deciding to get involved in running for public office and legislating and being a leader for life, even in a place like California where it's hard. And I was just sitting there going, when I was out with Jason Jones in the rain, praying in Bryan, College Station, Texas, or when I was traveling around, sometimes visiting 5, 6, 7 abortion facilities a day, praying with people in, the heat and the cold, whatever the conditions were, I never thought directly that this is going to influence the influencers in the legislative and political process. But it does. And everything we do, Jason, I remember when you came, I'm on the board of a maternity ministry here in Fredericksburg, Virginia called Mary's Shelter. And you came and spoke at our event for the fundraiser for Mary's Shelter. My wife works there part-time as a mentor for mothers and children and the messiness of their real life. And it's a beautiful ministry. But you, just in your keynote address, I still, years later, have people telling me, it changed their life. And it caused them to prioritize life, protecting the vulnerable more than they ever had before. And some of those people are people of influence in our local community. And so for each of us, we have to recognize what we do, we don't do in isolation. We're not on an island by ourselves. We're not doing this in a silo. We are a part of a movement where everything we do has ripple effects, and everything others do has ripple effects on us. And so embrace your place. Don't feel like you've got to be everything. I see some pro-life groups and leaders who think they have to do everything. No, you don't. Figure out what you are uniquely gifted and called to do. Go do that. Do it with excellence. And that, working with all the other parts of the movement, can help to achieve greater and greater victories. And one day, we're all going to be looking back and saying, oh my goodness, my little thing I did had all these ripple. How could that have ever happened? But that's when you know that God is really driving all this, and it's not because of goofy guys like David Bereit and Jason Jones.
No, I say God does stuff next to me, and then I take the credit. Like, I did that. Look at that. I don't even take credit for what God does. I also take credit for what you do. So,
well, just like we talked about earlier. I mean, you founded 40 Days for Life. I'm
going to put that on Wikipedia. I'm going to clip this quote. clip. David Bereit, end quote. No, I would be very, But for me, and I always say, I was just talking Bear Wozniak. I don't know if you know Bear. He's this legendary surfer, and he was on my show. He has a reality show on EWTN, and I'm a cast member on that. And we do a lot of things together. But I was telling Bear, and I think he was kind of offended we were talking about our ministries or apostolates when I was interviewing him, and I said, but the truth is, Bear, what we do is thin soup. What we do is thin soup. And I believe that. I think it's very thin. And it's the folks that run the really hard work is the guy or the lady who runs that 40 Days for Life year in and year out in her community. Whether she's battling cancer, whether or not her husband lost her job, whether or not her child's going through some problems, whatever it is, year in and year out, they're in front of that local Planned Parenthood. And that, to me, that's the real work, right? That's the really hard work. And our movement, when you look at the success that we've had, and I believe it's the way this is unfolding, I believe that in the next 10 years, we will have a human life amendment to the Constitution, or the Supreme Court will discover that in the 14th Amendment, human life is protected from biological beginning. But either way, I do believe from sea to shining sea in the next 10 years, life will be protected. And I see it as almost inevitable when you look at Students for Life of America and all the youth activists and how creative and intelligent and well-formed they are with all the resources and mentorships that they're getting. It just, it really seems to me to be inevitable. Is that something that you see now? Is it sort of this inevitability that the way the movement is just expanding and growing so rapidly?
Well, yeah, I mean, and in terms of that inevitability, I think it's because of all the great pro-life organizations that Jason Jones has started and is starting. We were talking before recording this Jason Jones show. Jason was like, "I'm gonna beat you, and I'm gonna do 49 days for life." So here he is, beating me by 9 days. I'm like, darn, he's so smart.
I did call you.
Starting up.
I did call you, though, when somebody started another organization that's similar to 40 Days for Life. When Kristen was on the show, we made jokes about this, how people will create programs of something that's successful. But I don't know if you remember, I called you, I said, 39 Days for Life and Rock Hard Abs. That's what I created. So it's one
well, if you
less
could promise
day
that,
and
you would have every 40 Days for Life participant abandon 40 days and go to the Rock Hard Abs. I'd be among them because, there's always room to get that six-pack.
No, and I always do this. And, when Abby Johnson started, and then there were none, and another organization started a program that looked very similar. So this is, for those of you historians, and all social movements, boats bump into each other from time to time. And that's why I created the whole life concept in Movie to Movement, because I didn't want to bump into anyone's boat. I'm like, where can I sail my boat to fish for fish that no one else is going to try to catch? That was kind of always been my thinking. And so I'm always taken aback when I see an organization start their own version of 40 Days for Life or something. But then someone tried to start something very similar to, and then there were none. So I put together like a whole one-pager on my new organization, and I sent it to Abby. It was called, And Then There Were Less Than None. And then I made Pupils for Life of America. I sent that to Kristen Hawkins. We talked about that.
Brilliant.
But none of these actually never got off the ground. My 39 Days for Life
so we
and
can't
Rock
give any
Hard
credit
Abs
to that.
never got off the ground. And Then There Were Less Than None. People thought that was absurd and made no sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. That never worked. And then Pupils for Life, I don't think it didn't have a nice ring to it. And that never
Well,
got off
it
the
also
ground.
confused people because they were like, is that the pupils in the eye or is that people, students? It's just confusing.
It was for
I get
ophthalmologists.
it. I mean,
it was.
there you go. It's the new
school.
ophthalmologist pro-life organization.
Yeah.
I get it. Going back to your inevitability question, though.
Not that we shouldn't work hard. I know I could hear you going, oh my gosh, Jason's like slowing people's roll. But that's not what I want to do. But anyway, continue. Sorry.
No, I mean, there is a momentum that is there. And we can either choose to embrace and ride that momentum, find our place and add to it, or we can ignore it. And when the history books are written, the people who embrace the moment and rode the wave of momentum are going to be the ones that are going to be remembered. Again, it's not just about legacy, but I think about, I live in Virginia, just an hour south of Washington, D.C. And when you go to D.C. and you go to the Holocaust Museum, at the end of the museum, you go into a room that's all these pictures and plaques and stories of people who were heroic in the time of the Holocaust in sacrificing to save the lives of those who were at risk. And you read these stories and you just are inspired. And I can't speak for others, but I thought, if I was there, I hope I would have been one of these people. I hope I would have done what was right even when it was life-threatening to do that. But one day, when the museum is built or when the history books are written or whatever it is, our children and our grandchildren are going to read. It's inevitable that abortion will be on the ash heap of history, not only overturning Roe, but inevitably we're going to look at it with disgust and disdain like we do slavery and other affronts against humanity, the Holocaust. When that happens, our children and grandchildren are going to be reading the stories of how it ended. And we get to decide today what stories they're going to be hearing. Are they going to be hearing the stories of, oh yeah, some, lobbying group in Washington, D.C., or all these other people who are doing things? Or are they going to hear your story that you were willing to discern your gifts, you were willing to step out, you were willing to innovate, you were willing to try new things, you were willing to fail more times than succeed, but you were willing to do everything you could to be a voice for the voiceless, and in so doing, you were a part of achieving the victory that history will look and say you were on the right side of history. So that to me is the inevitability. You can choose to be a part of that inevitability or choose to not be a part of it, but you're going to be accountable to your children and grandchildren, but also, ultimately, for those of us who are people of faith, we're going to be accountable to God. And one day when we arrive in our heavenly home, he's going to ask, what did you do for the least of these? What did you do for children in the womb? What did you do for their mothers? And that's going to be a terrifying day, particularly if we chose convenience over conviction. If we chose to say, well, I'll let somebody else take care of that, even though we knew in our heart that's something I'm supposed to do. So to me, it's that simple. I mean, are you scared? Sure. Do you have a low self-image like I did? Probably. Do you not know how to lead, not know how to do anything? Well, yeah, probably so. But you know what? Do it anyway. Just do it.
And nobody has these gifts, right?
You'll have other people to cheer you on.
No one is just blessed with these gifts, right? I mean, they have to work very hard at it.
That's right.
And I look at the first generation of pro-lifers like Father Paul Marks and Judy Brown and others, and I think, they started from scratch. They didn't think about it. They had no resources. They had no training, no preparation. Now they had the advantage of coming out of a culture of life, or more, not so darkened by Roe v. Wade yet. Right. But they were able to build, and I think each generation builds off of the failures and successes of the generations that came before them. And
so, Jason, can I flip the script here for a second?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
No. It's my
So
show.
somebody who's listening right now, and I'm sharing my thoughts and philosophies and encouragement and all that, what gives you hope right now? And what do you feel the person listening should do in light of this current cultural moment?
Okay, so, I believe that the logic of Roe has impacted everything from our foster care system to our foreign policy. And full legal protection for the child in the womb from the violence of abortion will happen in our lifetime by God's grace. But that is the first modest step into a culture of life. Like that's just getting out of the hole, this deep, dark hole that we've dug. We've not progressed to a culture of life. Not living in a society that doesn't dismember preborn children doesn't mean that you live in a humane society, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Prior to Roe versus Wade, we had legal discrimination. Just a decade before, we had the Ku Klux Klan, pulling Malcolm X's father across a railroad track and being run over. And so what I would hope people listening, and the reason I founded this podcast is I joked in the first episode that I want to do a show on genocide, democide, total war, and abortion, but no one in the world would listen to that. So I'm going to try to learn how to be entertaining and winsome. And when you're not paying attention, I'm going to talk to you about genocide, democide, total war, and abortion. And so I founded the show just kind of hoping to point people to serve the vulnerable nearest them. And sometimes if you have an autistic child, that could be all consuming, and you're not going to be able to go pray in front of 40 Days for Life regularly. You're not going to be able to start a political action committee or present yourself for office because you're caring for your child, or maybe you're caring for a sick parent, or maybe you started a pizza shop in your little town and you employ 14 people and you're working 20-hour days. But of course, when you pray, you can remember the preborn. When you tithe, you can support pro-life organizations. So what I would hope is that all of us just order our life to serve the vulnerable. And the pro-life movement, to me, its greatest service to society and the greatest gift it will leave our posterity is in a world where our elite, our elected officials, our media, it seems to be the people with the most power and wealth have ordered their lives to exploit the weak, to exploit the vulnerable, to trample on them. And what the pro-life movement is showing the world is that, no, there's another way, and that's to order your life to serve those who are vulnerable, who can do nothing for you. Because in the pro-life movement, obviously, the preborn child isn't generally going to come back and thank you. Now, from time to time with our work, we get those thank yous from children who chose life because of our work, and that's really something else, and I get to be friends with them. One young woman who I talked her mother into choosing life now is like a rabid pro-choice activist. It's very interesting to me. And it doesn't it doesn't even really break my heart. I feel some sorrow there. But
Sure.
So sometimes even,
But at least she had the opportunity to have a life, even if she chose to use it to champion something that just doesn't yet see that connection.
And I don't think she'll stay in that spot forever, But
Probably not.
yeah, that's my hope is to through our activism at the Vulnerable People Project, through my movies and through my podcasting, is to sort of lead by example that we can order our lives to serve the vulnerable, that the widows and orphans are our kings and queens, and we're here to serve them. That's what I would hope. And there's no...
Well, and Jason, what strikes me about what you just said, you said the vulnerable people nearest to us. I think back to, in Nehemiah in Scripture, and when they were needing to build the wall around the city. And the instruction was, build the piece of wall in front of your house. If everybody does that, we'll have the wall that we need. And for each of us, there are people around us in need. I look at my wife. I'm just going to use that as an example. My wife, when she was a public school teacher, when our children were born, she stayed home with them. She invested her life in them. She homeschooled them. She was there with them when they went to private Catholic high school, just very involved in their lives. But then when our daughter went off to college and then entered the Nashville Dominican Religious Order, when our son went off to college, Margaret was looking at, okay, I'm an empty nester. What do I do? And she looked around and said, where is there need? Right here, near me. And she knew about this maternity ministry where you spoke for Mary Shelter. And she said, well, there are women here who are coming from situations of abuse, family breakdown, drug addiction, the worst of the worst scenarios. And this is a ministry that brings them in, will house them for up to 3 years, will help them with their education, will help them find work, and will be there with them, with their children, through pregnancy, after the children are born, and even if they have other children. And Margaret said, I can do that. And so she assessed her gifts and talents, and she said, these are vulnerable moms, these are children at risk. What can I do? Well, Margaret is a cheerleader, not like cheerleader with pom-poms in it. Margaret loves to encourage people. She has a gift of encouragement and just loving people. She was teacher of the year when she was a public school teacher. So she said, I can encourage. I'm not an administrator. I'm not going to be the bad cop telling, when the mom, her room is dirty or anything like that. But she said, I can help them. I can cheer them on. And so Margaret's a mentor for these mothers. And these women ask Margaret to come and be there when they give birth to their babies. And she's there. They've never seen a mother figure in their life before. Many of them have, drug addictions, sexual abuse, the works they've been through. And here's someone, not just Margaret, but all the staff at Mary Shelter, who come alongside and say, we love you and we're here for you. And they recognize the vulnerability of those facing an unexpected pregnancy, and they give everything. And there have been times where we've gotten a call, in the middle of the evening, that somebody's toilet is overflowing, and we're going and I'm helping to get the toilet unclogged. And Margaret's in a hospital, for 36 hours as a mother's going through a very challenging labor. But I look at it and I say, that's what we are, as people of faith, are supposed to do. We are supposed to find those around us in need, and we're supposed to show them the love of Jesus Christ. And my wife taught me the importance of doing that, even though I'd been leading pro-life efforts for all these years, but watching her get into the messiness of real life with people and just loving them through it all. And Jason, I look at, as you share with me stories, and when we talk regularly on the phone and text and messages back and forth, and you're telling me stories about people who are being rescued from Afghanistan or people who are being helped in the Ukraine, and you're talking about just vulnerable people around the world that you and others are laying down everything to love and serve them. I see Jesus Christ through that, and that makes me want to serve him that much more. And I hope that what you're encouraging each of us, we take it to heart, and then we put it to action, because if just every listener of this episode of the Jason Jones Show said, who's somebody vulnerable around me, and how can I love and serve and help them, we're going to make the world a better place. And some of those people that you touch and help, they're going to recognize the opportunity that they have to assist other vulnerable people, and it will start to spread. And together, we really can have a world-changing impact.
You got me motivated. And, the vulnerable, as you know, and as your wife knows, they're not weak. They're strong people that have been placed in really difficult, almost impossible situations. And I always say that I'm not strong. I was just born in a boat. And some people are born at sea, cast out into the ocean. And that's then and there's going to come a day, by God's grace, unless I just get whacked by a bus one day because I'm not paying attention to when I'm crossing the road, there's going to come a day where I'm vulnerable, right? There's going to come a day where I'm elderly, where I'm sick, I have some debilitating illness, and where a 105-pound nurse is going to have to flip me over and change my diapers and make sure I don't get bed. This is going to happen. And that's the nature of the human person. There, we start out extremely vulnerable. We become strong for a time. We become vulnerable again. And when we have our strength, it's our responsibility to share that strength with the young, with the elderly, and with those who through illness or circumstances are placed in hard situations. I think of Justin Bieber. His life was saved by a pregnancy center in Canada. And, that little boy in the womb was very vulnerable, and he grew up to be tremendously wealthy and successful. And there'll come a day, well, now he's got this illness he's battling with. There's going to come a day where he's vulnerable again. And so that's the one thing that this work has really given me, is that humility to see the people we serve sometimes they're so much stronger than us. I mean, I'm more intelligent, harder working, creative, but and especially in my work in Afghanistan with the folks we're trying to rescue, they're so tremendously gifted and talented. They speak 7 languages. They've accomplished so much, and they've been living a year in an attic because the Taliban is hunting them. And it's almost even embarrassing for me that someone like me has to help someone like that. Does that make sense? Like, I feel embarrassed.
Totally. Well, and two things on that. So first, remind me to come back to the Taliban and Afghanistan. But the first thing is, I think of my friend Zach Barsavac. Zach was a young man that Margaret and I got to know when we lived in College Station, and he was in his 20s, had his whole life lived with cystic fibrosis. He married his college sweetheart, and in his 20s, his health began to decline. Ultimately, he died from cystic fibrosis. But during the last 6 months, as his lungs were failing and as his health was going down, this was a guy who I knew as a vibrant, dynamic, energetic, articulate young man, really involved in campus ministry, really involved in just like an inspirational force. In watching his health decline, kind of like what we saw with John Paul II when we watched his health declining. But I was watching Zach, and he spoke at a retreat at our church, and he had his oxygen tank with him. He couldn't talk more than a few sentences before needing to stop and catch his breath through the oxygen tank. And he said, I really struggled because I had always been kind of self-reliant. I'm American. I can do it all. And as my health began to decline, I realized that I was essentially vulnerable and I needed help, and I couldn't do it on my own. And he said, I really was struggling with that whole, like, I have to ask others for help. And then he said, I really felt convicted in prayer that what God was telling me is those other people need to help you. That's part of their responsibility and their call, their Christian mission. Don't deny them their ability to serve you, because one day somebody's going to need to serve them. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And we all realized that that's exactly what you said, that vulnerability at all times. We're all going to get there. Maybe it's a mother who is in labor and just needs help, is vulnerable at that moment. Maybe it's somebody whose health fails, or maybe it's somebody who is hit by a bus because they're not paying attention and the bus doesn't kill them, but they're debilitated. But we all are going to be in some way, shape, or fashion vulnerable at some point. So we have to look around and say, who can I serve that is right now vulnerable? They're a strong person, but they need help at this moment. And the other thought I have, just related to going back to the Taliban and Afghanistan, is you and I talked about this, Jason, but we're coming up on an anniversary of the American pullout from Afghanistan. And I just think that we as Americans, we, our nation, made some major foreign policy disasters. What you are doing and what others are doing is helping to make up for it. But we need to redouble our efforts to be there for those who are vulnerable because of how we left that nation in a bad situation. And so I just want to say, Jason, whatever you need from me, whatever you need from those listening to this podcast, let's rally, because the people of Afghanistan, many of them were left stranded because of our nation's foreign policy. And we need to together link arms and do what we can to help them, because they're some of the vulnerable in our midst right now. So anything we can do.
We talked about this, so maybe we can share it now. We're planning on hopefully doing like a town hall, some sort of, how would you describe it, David? Like a webinar.
We talked about doing an online event where we could really tell the stories of those who have been helped and those who are still at risk, and to invite all of us to do our part. There are people who are at risk. There are people who are vulnerable right now. And each of us who have been blessed, to whom much is given, much is required. Let's find our place. Let's see what we can do to help out at this time.
David, I'm really excited to do that, because I will never quit. And I thank God for the pro-life movement to teach me that over 33 years, the pro-life movement has trained me that you just keep going, regardless of how dark things become or how uphill it seems or futile it seems. I remember when I graduated college and My dad said, "You're really going to commit your life to doing nothing but trying to end abortion?" He said that it's a joke. He just laughed at me. Him and his wife were just like literally, we were at a bar in Chicago. They were just laughing at me. Like tears are coming down my eyes. Like, no, Dad, you're going to see, we're going to end abortion. And of course, in 1998, you couldn't really see that, but I saw it. And in Afghanistan, I feel like quitting almost every day because groups are quitting every day, and we're having trouble sustaining support for the folks that we've committed to supporting. And, every week or so, an organization will contact us and say, we no longer can sustain these safe houses. We no longer can provide food for these people. There's no path for them. So we're just letting them know they have a week and then they're going to be let out of the safe houses. And then we have to try to pick up those houses, and we're barely making ends meet with the safe houses that we have committed to. But I believe that what happened in Afghanistan is a direct result of Roe v. Wade. And maybe when you're a hammer, you think everything's a nail. But the way we so thoughtlessly abandoned the people of Afghanistan after making so many promises over 20 years, and then just sort of like Joe Biden said on July 6th of last year, Afghanistan will never fall. When he said that, David, 85% of the districts in Afghanistan had already fallen. So he was lying. He knew that Afghanistan was in the process of collapsing. And he knew that those men and women that served alongside of us in the war on terror would be hunted and killed. We saw people falling off of planes. That's when we got pulled in by desperate folks asking for help. And I made the mistake, David, is everyone that reached out to our organization for help, I just said something I was trained to say in the military. I just wanted to comfort them. And so I would say, you're going to be okay. We'll be with you till you're safe. And if I didn't say that, I might have quit already. But I have a list with 400 some people that we still have not been able to resettle, that when they contacted our organization, I personally told them, we will be with you till you're safe. So as tired as I am, as exasperated as I am, there's just no quitting. And I tell my staff, are we 1 year better than Joe Biden? Is that it? He abandoned them a year ago. Are we going to abandon them this year? So we just did 1 year better? Is that it? We're just 1 year more faithful to our friends than Joe Biden? And the Afghans, David, as you can imagine, they're very tired. They're very frustrated, and they can't really wrap their mind around why we can't resettle them. They just don't understand why we just can't buy them a plane ticket and fly them here sometimes. And it's as you can imagine, they're tired, they're scared, they're frustrated. They see the months and now a year of their life just slipping away. So it's a very challenging project. But again, like you asked me earlier about what can people listening do, there's so much work to do. And you might say, well, you've contradicted yourself, Jason. You said help the people closest to you. This was helping the people closest to me. Our organization was founded to advance the interests of vulnerable ethnic and religious minorities that have been negatively impacted by our foreign policy. And this whole project began in Afghanistan, David, when Jennifer Cadena, the co-founder of Movie to Movement with me, sent me a message and said, can you help rescue my friend's mother-in-law? She's being hunted by the Taliban. And I said, yeah, we'll do our best. And then that led to one person, then two, then 7, then 20, then 100, then 1,000. And here we are a year later. We've helped tens of thousands of Afghans in the past 12 months.
Well, and to that point of those closest to you, somebody knocked on your door, somebody called you, somebody sent you a message. That was the door that was being opened right near you. And for each of us, we have to just recognize sometimes, it was when we did the first 40 Days for Life, Jason, I didn't expect it would ever spread like you envisioned. But then people started to call and say, we want to do it. And it was that call that led me to turn your vision into a reality and take it beyond one small Texas town. So, it's look at where God is working around you. I think Henry Blackaby in the book Experiencing God said, if you want to do God's will, a lot of times you don't have to look very far. Where is God moving around you? And join him in what he's doing. And that's what you are doing. And that's what each of us get to do. See where God's moving, see where there are vulnerable people, and join them.
David, I'm going to ask you two last questions. I've taken a lot of your time.
Love it.
100 years from now, someone's listening to this. They're facing transhumanism, subhumanism. The robots are attacking them, and who knows what's going on. And maybe the robots have, subjugated the human race, and they're looking to fight for their rights. And they're looking to the pro-life movement as an example. What would you want them to know about, influencing culture, directing a campaign, a justice campaign, how to advocate human? What would you want to share with our posterity as they're battling transhumanist, artificial intelligence, man-eating robots? What would you want them to know?
Pull the plug on the robot.
Just pull the plug. That's it. We're done. Thank you for listening to the Jason Jones. Shut off the electricity.
There you go. I didn't get my last question. I thought, yeah.
Okay.
What comes immediately to mind is, first of all, know that there is a God. He hears and answers prayers, and the things that to us are impossible with him are possible. So first, just with him, all things are possible. I cannot underscore that point enough. My experience, 40 Days for Life did not happen because of me or anybody else. It really didn't even happen because of Jason Jones. It happened because of God and his people answering his call. So know that God is real, know that he hears and answers prayers, and know that with him all things are possible. Number two is find the thing that you feel called to do and do it. For Jason, it's I'm going to help vulnerable people, and I'm going to overcome genocide and abortion and these other things. For me, it was I'm going to mobilize 1 million people to pray and fast and stand up against abortion, and now helping other organizations do other things. But find your place, and you won't have all the skills, you won't have all the talents, but learn as you go, make mistakes, fail, fall short. But if it's if the need is big enough, if your why is big enough, that Simon Sinek TEDx talk about how do leaders inspire great action, you've got to start with why. If your why is big enough,
which TEDx talk is this? I didn't catch that. I'm going to listen to it. Which one is that?
Yeah, Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, who wrote a book called Start With Why. He gave a TEDx talk. I believe it's called How Leaders Inspire Great Action. It's one of the most watched TED Talks anywhere.
Okay.
But the whole point of it is he was talking about how great leaders move people is by identifying, before you talk about what you do and how you do it, you got to get to the why. Why do you do it? And why would others do it with you? And uses examples of the Wright brothers and Steve Jobs and others that really inspired people around the why. And I think for each of us, we've got to get clear in our own mind, what's our why? Why do we get up in the morning? Why are we willing to sacrifice? Why are we willing? Jason was talking about persistence. Why are we willing to persist and struggle and suffer and endure setbacks and challenges? If the why is big enough, you'll do it. And you'll figure out the what. You'll figure out the how. You'll figure out who you need to do it with. I knew none of the things I needed. Not one thing that I needed did I know when starting up 40 Days for Life. But my why was big enough, and all the other things eventually came together. And so it's God, your why, find your place, get into action, and align yourself with others. And that's my last thought. You can't do this on your own. I was talking with a leader just the other day about, sometimes we hear about the power of one, and one person can make a difference. Well, at least when it comes to changing the culture, yes, one person can make a difference. Each of us is called to make a difference. But we are not alone. We have not only ourselves, but we have God, going back to my first point, but also we have others. And Jason, you have people on the ground in Afghanistan who are helping to make the reality of helping save people. I had people in different cities and towns across America and around the world running 40 Days for Life campaigns. So we've got those three things. It's ourselves, it's God, and it's others together. No single social problem in history was created by a single person or factor or organization, and no major social problem will be solved by a single person, organization, or single factor. It's going to take collective action. And so you find your place, link arms with others who are doing it, put your trust in God and let him guide you. And those three things, to me, that's the three-ply cord that Scripture talks about that is not easily broken. By one, pull it apart. Two, can be broken. Three, can't easily be broken. So you, God, and others, find your place, find your mission, get into action, and I believe you can truly be a part of changing whatever the challenge that you're facing in your day, in your time, just as we have strived to do in our time with this great human rights injustice of abortion and these other affronts against people who are at risk and vulnerable.
Well, David, I'm glad you said that, because that's when I think David Bereit, you're someone that comes along others and helps them be better. You mentor them, you coach them. I think I called you the other day on the phone. I said you were the MSG of the pro-life movement. Do you remember that?
Yes. Which that was the first time anybody's ever said that. So
you make everything taste better, and then we get really sleepy afterwards. You may cause cancer. By the way, I don't know if MSG causes cancer. It may.
But it might.
It might, and it definitely makes you sleepy. But what I mean by that is I've watched you come alongside a lot of different pro-life organizations, and then they just start to pop. There's something different happens. David Bereit shows up, and then bam, you bring out what's best about what they already had. Does that make sense? It's like you're not changing anything. I just see, whoa, he's really brought out what's special about that organization, and then I watch them flourish.
Well, you're very kind to say that. It's my passion. You know, I whenever I talk to you, I always say, how can I be of help? How can I be praying for you? What can I do? And I don't mean that insincerely. I mean it as if I went out, let's say in 2016, I stepped away from 40 Days for Life. I initially thought I was going to go start up another nonprofit of some sort. And I just didn't have a peace about it, spent a lot of time on my knees. But ultimately, what really dawned on me is no matter what, let's say I built the biggest, most effective nonprofit advocacy organization, whatever it is, it's going to only have so much influence and impact. But if instead I could help 100 leaders reach their highest potential, or 1,000 leaders build what God's putting on their heart to do, that's where we have exponential impact. And I really feel that, I had my season. I started a ministry. I grew it. God used it in a profound way. I learned a lot through it. 40 Days for Life, it was amazing. But I now recognize that for me to just go do that again, I've already done that. I can do more good by helping others discover their call, live that out, and do it with the highest level of impact. Not that I have all the answers, but I like to be kind of fan the flames, help encourage, cheer people on, like my wife, pour gas on the fire. So that's really where I feel that this season of my life I'm meant to be. And hence the reason, when you invited me to come on to these 49 Days for Life, JasonJonesFounded.com, I was thrilled to do it because I think that the person listening right now, you have something you can do. And if Jason can encourage you, if I can encourage you, if we can help you, you can do something amazing that neither of us could ever do. And if we've helped in any way, then we get to put our head down at the end of the day and say, we've done a good thing. And hopefully one day meet our maker and hear, well done, good and faithful servant. That's my passion. That's my hope. And so, Jason, even I look at what you've done, not only in the organizations you've run, but like this show and how it's a breath of fresh air for all of us. And yes, I have listened to a few episodes, despite what we said at the beginning. But you've inspired me to realize that in addition to building organizations, helping, mentoring leaders, one of the things we can do is fan the fires of hope for people through media. And so we've talked about, I'm getting ready in September to launch a brand new media project inspired by another one that Jason Jones will take credit for later, inspired by the great Jason Jones. But I'm excited to do it because I feel that it's using our gifts to help encourage others and to let's start a grass fire that changes the world for good.
You talk about giving hope. That's why I started the show, because my friend Salih Hudaya, the prime minister in exile for occupied East Turkestan, he was, frustrated that he couldn't get more media attention. And I thought, well, if I had a podcast, even if 10 people listened to it, I could put them on the air and give them some hope. And that was the idea, that I would have a show that I could give representatives from vulnerable communities the opportunity to come on and speak up. And that was the whole idea. Now, speaking of knitting together a lot of organizations, you just did this huge event, Life Beyond Row. Maybe we'll end on that because I want everyone to go check that out. It's lifebeyondrow.com. I mean, there's something seriously wrong with the speakers lineup. I don't know how this happened. Let me look here. I'm not on it. What in the world?
Oh no. He's going to give me grief about that again?
I'm not on. Wait, I'm looking. No, I wasn't on this. But you have everyone. I mean, everyone. Let's see here.
Well, can I tell the quick story of how this all came together and then grovel and beg for forgiveness that I didn't include?
No. Listen, Hadley Arcus is the least. I think he is one of our national treasures, but the pro-life movement doesn't really use him enough. So to see Hadley Arcus there made me very happy.
Yeah. So as it was becoming clear that the Dobbs decision would very likely overturn Roe v. Wade, I had a few leaders reach out to me and said, David, you're kind of like in a free agent role. You're not running an organization. You aren't only interested in the good of a single part of the movement. And maybe you could get the whole movement to unite together and do something to demonstrate a united front publicly. And I started thinking about it and I said, okay, well, maybe I can. And I have a skill of being able to put on online events. Hence the reason I'm excited to help Jason do this for the Afghan people. So I started talking to a few people. A few people said, sounds great. And within 48 hours of the decision dropping, so it dropped on Friday. So on Monday morning, we announced that we were having this webcast called lifebeyondrow.com. And initially there were maybe 2 dozen leaders that started to say they would speak on it. By the time we had the event that Wednesday, so 48 hours after we announced it, 43 leaders spoke on the event. And so it's every aspect of the movement. So you've got the legal, you've got the legislative, you've got the political, you've got the post-abortion, you've got the pregnancy centers, you've got the people outside abortion facilities, you've got those who are using communication and messaging, you've got the group that Pupils for Life is modeled after, the Students for Life, and all those types of, how does it affect the medical field? Focus on the Family, Jim Daly, and it was like a who's who of leaders. I actually apologize. The reason I didn't ask Jason is because I knew how buried he was in trying to help people, vulnerable people in other parts of the world, and I just felt like it would possibly distract him from that. I should have at least asked.
I was teasing you. No. Do you know what? It was funny when I saw it. I was like, oh, do I want to do that? I bet if I should email David and ask to be a part of that. And I thought, you
would have been in a heartbeat.
I said, everybody's bombarding David right now saying, why aren't I on this list? And I said, I'm not going to bother.
Well, you're right.
I'm not going to bother poor David Bereit. I was like, yeah, I'd like to be a part of this. And then I was like, oh my gosh, poor David. He is getting hammered right now by everybody asking to be added. That was my thinking. So I'm like, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be that guy.
Your thinking was right. And the beautiful thing about it, Jason, was each of these speakers got 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And it was a hard stop. So to have 43 leaders each give 1 point in 3 minutes, you got the breadth and the depth of the pro-life movement. It's a 2.5-hour event. You can register. You can actually access the recording, and we've got it all broken up into chapters. You can go right to, if you say, I want to hear Abby Johnson, or I want to hear from Jeannie Mancini at the March for Life, or I want to hear from Tony Perkins at Family Research Council, or I want to hear Eric Scheidler, or whomever else, Father Mike Schmidt. I want to go to that. You can go straight to that person's comments. But it's beautiful to see the movement. Like we were talking earlier about all these different groups. Well, guess what? We're all in this human rights cause together. And it was this beautiful united front. And 23,501 people participated in the live event, and another 10,000 plus have watched the replay since that time. 23,501 were on the live broadcast. And then we had another more than 10,000 have watched the replay after the fact. So it's incredibly encouraging. It's filled with hope. Give you a lot of options on ways that you can get involved. And lifebeyondrow.com. Check it out.
It's in the show notes, guys. Life Beyond Row is in the show notes. And maybe that should be the name of this episode. I don't know if I should call it 40 Days for Life with David Bereit or Life Beyond Row. Maybe Life Beyond Row. I don't know. But I think that... Well, I hope.
Or the Jason Jones fan club.
I think everyone needs to go to this. Everybody needs to go to lifebeyondrow.com because this historic moment, this unprecedented event, it is a historic moment. And to have all of these different leaders coming, like Hadley Arcus, one of the greatest political philosophers the past 100 years. I can't wait till I haven't listened yet. Full disclosure, but I cannot wait to listen to. I mean, there's so many. Everyone on this list is a friend of mine, which is unbelievable. And what I tell folks about when you get involved in the pro-life movement, you're meeting the most wonderful people on earth. Mm-hmm. You're just surrounded by wonderful, beautiful people. They're unimaginably beautiful, really.
Well, and the only thing I would say, though, Jason, is I was a little bit miffed because, once again, we had 43 leaders and speakers talking, and then you come up with oh, yeah, I'm going to beat that. We're going to have 49 people on the Jason Jones Show. I'm just glad that, unlike me, you were willing to be kind, and you were willing to invite me to be a part of it. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I look forward to listening to these episodes, and I look forward to sharing them with other people. And I thank you, Jason, for being such an inspiration, such a great leader, and such a dear friend and colleague in these fights for the vulnerable all across our nation and around the world. It is an honor to co-labor in the Lord's harvest field with you.
Well, ditto, brother. And I remember the first time you brought me to Texas, we went and got tacos. Do you remember that? Do you remember getting tacos together?
We need to do tacos again soon.
We went and got tacos. I met Abby Johnson the first time through you, just maybe weeks after she left the abortion industry. Do you remember that? I think Eduardo Verastegui. You've been with me for so many, everything really. The Brownback for President camp, way back. Because I came to DC in 2000. I had been working in the pro-life movement in Hawaii from 89 to 2000. And then I met you in 2000. Was it November 2003, I think, is when we first met at
That's probably right.
At American Life League. And then you came to the Rock for Life event where we partnered with the Passion of the Christ. Do you remember that?
I do, yes.
We
were at I think it was all at was it the Hyatt, the Capitol Hyatt? I remember like the rooms. I can picture being there.
Yeah, and we had a special sizzle reel about 10 minutes long with a message from Jim Caviezel and Mel Gibson to the pro-life, the folks that showed up to the March for Life. And that was really kind of the very beginnings of, I made a documentary in 2000, but this idea I had to harness celebrities for the pro-life movement really kind of kicked off, where I could see how powerful that was at that first, at that American Life League youth event, together with the Passion of the Christ that we held. And that's when we really first got to know each other. And then I remember when I showed it up at your event, I think I kind of had to beg my way onto your stage to speak.
Yeah, I think you did, and I think there was some deal where you were promoting your own things, and wasn't it selling T-shirts or something? I don't remember what it was.
So with Brian
but I was
Kemper,
initially like, really? But then literally, did I know?
It was National Pro-Life T-shirt Day. It was we had our second annual, which it's still happening now, but at this time in 2004, it was the second year of our National Pro-Life T-shirt Day, which now there's 2 days a year. And I had these huge boxes of T-shirts. I really just didn't want to have to carry them back home on the plane. So I was like, I got to sell these shirts. These boxes are so heavy. And it's kind of embarrassing, one guy carrying 7 huge boxes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a privilege for me to know you and work with you and to be at those first 40 Days for Life. And I think by the third year, it just went 1 location, 2 locations. And by the third year, it was just impossible to keep up with it. There were just so many locations added so rapidly.
Yeah, and you made a commitment you were going to go to all of them. And so we're still waiting for that to happen.
I think that would have to be my full-time job.
It would. For a number of years, I visited, I think, last I counted, something like 600 cities.
You did 600 cities?
Yeah, over a decade. So I was hitting somewhere between 70 and 80 cities per campaign, and you do the best you can. But now that it's grown even beyond that, I'm like, okay, I give up. I can't do it all.
No, that's just an unbelievable 600 cities. What I like to do is when I travel the country, I always like to find out where people are praying in front of their local Planned Parenthood. And I just show up, and I don't know if you've ever. It's something I like to do, and just meet these beautiful people that are the thick. We're the thin soup. They're doing the thick work, the hard work of day in and day out, week in and week out, Because it's one thing to travel to a city and tell people that they need to be in front of their local abortion clinic every day. Then it's another thing to do it when you see your friend from high school's daughter walk through the door and all of the intimate ways. And when you serve one's community, I think it's so much more challenging. And that's why those folks that are in front of their local, I was talking to one of our friends who's going to come on the show next week about, praying in front of abortion clinics and all the challenges and being assaulted. The day that the Roe decision came out in Milwaukee, an abortionist came out of as soon as like there's a news story broke or something, they were setting up, getting ready to pray that morning. And the abortionist came and just punched an 11-year-old girl in the face, which just seems absolutely unbelievable. But our friend Dan Miller was telling me that story, and that's rare. And he even said this woman was often in all the years that he knew her, she was very decent and respectful to them. But that day, just emotions, were running high, and she reacted in a very inappropriate way and was arrested.
Well, that's why we need to lift each other up in prayer, and that's why we need to all stand together with one another. And Jason, you asked me my two final questions. Can I ask you one final quick question before we close out?
Yes, sir.
How can we all be praying for you and for your ministry work?
All right, I'll tell you what's burdening me right now. A lot of the migrants that we're working with in Afghanistan and Pakistan and UAE and in other what we call lily pads, places where they're being held or they're hiding, like in Afghanistan, or they're in safe houses in Pakistan. They're getting very tired. They're frustrated. I can tell they're even angry with us for not being successful in relocating them yet. So pray that they would just be comforted and given fortitude and endurance. Pray that pathways for every Afghan who's been made vulnerable because they served alongside the United States in its war on terror or Western organizations, that they're all resettled with their families safely, and that we are able to raise the resources, which we are not right now. Up until about 6-7 weeks ago, we were successfully keeping up with our responsibilities, but as more and more groups have left, we're crushed, and we're reorganizing and looking at how we can help everyone that's been let out of safe houses that were being run by other organizations. As far as we know, we're the last organization funding large groups of safe houses and folks inside Afghanistan and across Pakistan. So we can meet our financial responsibilities, that the Afghans that we're serving, that they have empathy and patience. And in a way, I'm kind of being passive aggressive. I know you guys listen. A lot of them listen to the Jason Jones Show, and know that I think about them. We think about them all day, every day. But we're standing and staring at a brick wall. So yeah, that's it. That God would give them the grace to have fortitude and patience, and that we would have the resources and opportunities to not only care for them on the lily pads, but to resettle them, that they can live beautiful lives. And I travel with the list of every single refugee and all of their families that's on our list, and I travel with it. And as I'm sitting on planes or in Ubers, I just look over all of their names, so that it is forever and always very real to me. And I am exasperated, and overwhelmed and a little broken, but I'm not going to quit. And that is the grace that the pro-life movement has given me. And David, going back to that real quick, in college, I did this. My pro-life student union was active in opposing the CCP and speaking out on what was happening in Kosovo and Rwanda at the time. Because even then, the pro-life movement, as fledgling as it was, it had structure and it had organizations and folks. And I thought, what if I could leverage this to serve people facing genocide and democide? And now to see just at a global level that we're able to do that, and that the pro-life movement has been a great partner with us in serving these vulnerable communities that are as human, obviously, and as real and as vulnerable as the child in the womb. And I see it as a like and commensurate issue to abortion, saving Christians or SIVs in Afghanistan from democide and genocide. So yeah, just pray that we can, everyone, this is the prayer. Let me make it simple. Everyone I said, we're going to be with you till you're safe, that God gives us the grace and the resources to be with them, and by God's grace, we move them to safety.
Okay. Well, count on my prayers, and I hope the person listening will join in that prayer as well. And Jason, thanks for leading the way, inspiring all of us, and for inviting us into some of this critical work that is having such a profound effect on those who are at risk and those who are vulnerable. I appreciate you, brother.
Well, I love you, and I appreciate you, David Bereit. I want you to stay with me as we close, because it kind of got heavy there at the end. You asked me these questions, and I just get all heavy.
And that's not normal for Jason and David.
No, I mean, I hope not. I think when you're on the battlefield, you learn to have gallows humor. But how do you sleep in David Bereit? Do you sleep well at night?
Is this a promotion for a pillow, or what do we?
It might be. It might be. How do you sleep at night?
I actually sleep really good most nights.
What kind of pillow do you
with
have?
The exception of sometimes when my cat gets up on me, and like that can be a little bit distracting. So if you've got a solution to help me with the cat.
I do. Well, first of all, I do. It's funny you should ask. Last year during the great ice storm in Texas, I went and rounded up some stray cats. This is a true story. My wife said, how do you tell this to people? She thinks I'm a lunatic. We had this ice storm, and I said, there are these cats in the neighborhood. We're bringing them in the house. We had no heat. We had a fireplace, and I had like stray cats. We put our My Pillow mattress topper on the floor with our dog looking at me like I'm a lunatic, and like, who are these cats? Who brought these cats in the house? My wife doesn't want me to tell the story. It's a true story. So these cats, they loved the mattress topper. So I'm not saying the cat's not going to, he'll probably jump on your bed more, but if you need a good night's sleep, the first thing you need is Mike Lindell's pillow, which you can get at mypillow.com. And if you use the code Jones, you get a deep discount. And you know we're suffering inflation, David Bereit. Did you know we're suffering inflation right now? Have you heard about that?
I see it every time I'm at the gas pump or at the grocery store. So yes, I know that.
If I told you there was something now that's cheaper now than it has ever been, you wouldn't even pass that up. If you go to mypillow.com.
How could I?
You couldn't. If you go to mypillow.com right now, you can get the best price ever on Mike Lindell's slippers. And it is like walking around in the presidential suite of the Trump Hotel. That's how it feels like on your feet.
Wow.
The Trump Hotel does not endorse this commercial, but that's what it feels
like. But Jason Jones does.
Yeah. So listen, also, where do you go first? This is a real question. Do you have, well, first of all, before we sell newspapers, do you not have a Mike Lindell pillow?
I confess I do not yet.
I'm not kidding you. It changed my life because I have neck problems. I don't use pillows. And when my Mudhouse Media said, we're going to be partnering with My Pillow, I said, I have a problem, guys. I don't use pillows. They said, well, they're shipping you everything on their product line. Just try it out. And the reason I don't like pillows is because they're usually too big, but I can make this pillow thin. You can make it big or thin, however you want. And because I'm a hot guy, like I always have to change the pillow. This pillow doesn't get hot. And it's made in America, and we're decoupling our economy from China, and I'm decoupling my personal economy from China. So you got to get the pillow. That's all I'm telling you. And if you use the secret code Jones, it's a secret, you get a discount like never before.
Okay, so I use the code Jones, and is it at mypillow.com?
Mypillow.com, and you use the code Jones, and then you get startlingly deep discounts on everything. It's unbelievable.
I want to know what that startle will be. I'm like,
well, you'll be startled.
Totally
Trust
excited.
me. You're going to look at the prices. You're going to put in the code Jones. You're going to apply, and then you're going to see all the prices change, and you're going to go, that's unbelievable. You just go, Jason Jones.
I just entered the promo code Jones. Whoa.
Jason Jones.
The prices are dropping like
right?
They're dropping like gas prices are not.
Right. Okay. So listen, the other rule I have, David Bereit, you know this about me. I didn't want sponsors. I said to Mudhouse Media, I said, I don't want sponsors. And they said, well, the deal we have with you is we produce your show and platform it and push it out there for you in exchange for ad revenue that we split with you. And I said, I don't want to sell ads. They said, well, that's not how it works, Mr. Jones. And I said, well, it's only going to be things I love. So they're going to find, and they're like, what you love? And I gave them a list of things I love. Well, I put my favorite newspaper on that list. You know what my favorite newspaper? What's your favorite newspaper, David Bereit?
Golly,
you can tell the truth. We can disagree.
And favorite. That's like tell me about one because I can't think of one that I like.
Are you serious?
Most of them, I'm
about to change your world.
Yeah, tell me a good one.
Epic Times, the number 4 newspaper in America. The Epic Times. You can get a print and digital. You go there and you use the code Jason Jones, and for $1 a month, you get a subscription. That's the special. That's unbelievable. Okay, for a month, you get it for $1. Then we'll auto renew. It's going to cost you $99 for the year. But let me say this: it is when I was talking to Mudhouse and I made him a list of things I like. At the very top of the list was Epic Times. Very top of the list, because it's about faith, it's about family, it's about freedom, and they cover the stories that the mainstream media tries to bury. And they are now the number 4 newspaper in America. And I promise you, in the next 2 or 3 years, they will be the number 1 newspaper in America because people want the truth.
Wow.
They want the truth.
All right, so I'm sitting here at theepictimes.com. Is that the right place?
No. I read epoch.com.
Ooh, I read Epoch.
EPOCH. People call it Epic Times. I get people emailing me, Jason, you say it wrong, so I say it both ways so people don't email me, and then they email me.
And I enter the promo code Jason Jones?
That's it. And then you apply, and then look. Jason Jones.
Whoa. And it just dropped like $22 just by doing that.
Right. You just saved $22. So now it's not $99 a year. It's $77 a year. When you get the print and digital subscription, you know what I love doing? In my neighborhood, I'm the new guy. I cut up articles, and I give them to my neighbors.
Well, these are the neighbors that ranked you the number 1 podcast, right?
They do. They do. Listen. Okay. No, when you start a podcast, David Bereit, your family and friends and your neighbors listen. It's true.
Wow.
People who hated you in high school become your biggest fans. It's strange. People that I know don't like me tell me they never miss an episode. And I'm like, why are they listening? I know that the person doesn't like me. I remember in high school, they didn't like me at all. And then they're emailing me, I never miss an episode. I want them to listen. But your neighbors listen. I promise. Okay. My neighbors listen. But I love to give them Epic Times. Because remember in the old days, you'd cut up an article from a newspaper and you'd mail it to your friend, and your friend would mail you an article and you'd feel special and you'd say, oh, that's very thoughtful of him to send me that article on food insecurity. Well, now what people do is they email it to you or they tag you on social media. But I have some elderly neighbors, and when I come over with my clipped up articles from the Epic Times, they just beam. And then digital.
It brings them back.
Yeah, and then digital. You need the digital. The other thing about the print is I leave it around for my kids. I subscribe to a lot of magazines. I should do a whole show on all the magazines I subscribe to. And why do I do that? Why do I get the print subscriptions to Chronicles, First Things, American Conservative, I can go on and on. Reason Magazine, is I want my kids to pick them up and read them. So I just throw them all over the house in different places. But having the Epic Times laying around, the print edition, is very important for me.
Well, I'm going to be waiting for my clipped articles that you're going to send me, but then I can clip some from my subscription and send them to you.
Yeah, but you're not my neighbor, so I'm probably going to send you the digital article. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I need to see that there is such a thing as a print newspaper that actually has good stuff in it.
You asked for it. I'm going to start sending you. I'm going to clip out something from Muscle and Fitness Magazine on how to improve your bench press.
Well, here's what you do. You clip an article from Epic Times.
Rock hard abs for summer.
Take a photo of it and you text it to me, just so I know it's real.
Yeah, I did that to somebody yesterday, a friend of mine, retired field grade officer. He was asking me these questions about physics and apologetics, and I just had remembered that Frederick Copleston, who wrote the famous 7-volume series on Western philosophy, if you know of it, he was a Jesuit priest from the United Kingdom. I think he probably died in the 50s, 60s. He was writing in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and he got in a debate with Bertrand Russell, and but it was on sort of metaphysics, and I couldn't find it on the internet, but I had it in this old book in my house. So I just took a picture of every page, and I was just texting him images of the pages. So that's what I'll do for you.
That is so kind.
Okay, we have one more thing to plug.
Okay. What is it, and how do I get it? And what code do I need to use?
I'm losing David Bereit's interest. Okay, there's no code. It's the like, guys, if you caught that, like most of you have already left. David's barely hanging on. This episode has been brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. We stand in solidarity with the vulnerable when others flee. From the child in the womb to SIVs in safe houses across Afghanistan and Pakistan, we are there. And we need you to stand shoulder to shoulder with us as we serve the vulnerable. And you can do that by going to thegreatcampaign.org and becoming a monthly donor. Give us your best one-time gift, but then please give us monthly gifts, because that allows us to budget in our support and our advocacy for vulnerable communities suffering ethnic cleansing, genocide, democide, and war. There is no organization like us in the world. You can look, and we go when everyone else leaves. We are there to serve these vulnerable communities, but we cannot do it without your partnership. All right, David Bereit, lifebeyondrow.com, and you can get a quick, if you're not into 3-hour meandering conversations with pro-life leaders over 49 days, and you want, get to the point of it.
3 minutes.
In
snapshot.
3 minutes, the most important thing you want folks to know, then there is no better place for you to go than to lifebeyondrow.com. And there are all of my heroes lined up, and I cannot wait to spend some time. And I'm actually going to use your event to kind of poach a lot of speakers, because I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot about this person. So I'm going to use this as my cheat
You're going to be
sheet.
up to 53 days.
I might never stop. 49 days in a row talking to pro-life heroes is not even scratching the surface. As you found out when you did this, right? You're like, you could go on and on.
And it didn't even include Jason Jones, so I could have easily gotten to 49 and far more.
But, think about it. There's so many people that have done so much for so long. That list goes on forever. And now with the young, there was a time, David Bereit, where I knew everyone and every organization in the pro-life movement, and I knew them, I studied them, and I tried to get to know them personally. That would be utterly impossible right now. In fact, I would say there is not a pro-life movement anymore. There is a pro-life empire made up of several different movements. There are all these movements that are swirling around that are all committed to defending women and children from the violence of abortion. But in many ways, they're so diverse and different. They're almost separate movements. You know what I mean?
I do. Yep, you're right.
All right, David Bereit, I'm going to land this plane. You jump off. I've bored you enough.
Jason, it's an honor and a privilege to always serve alongside you, my friend, and keep up your great work, and let me know when we're ready to rock and roll with the Afghan support and anything else we can do together. It's always an honor, and I want to have you as a guest on the inaugural episodes of my new media project as well. Thank you for inspiring me on so many levels. I appreciate it.
That would be an honor. Thank you, brother. Thank you for all you do. All right, that was the great David Bereit. Another long interview. And, I feel like maybe I'm just not the best interviewer. Although you guys are sending me a lot of emails. I've never gotten so many emails as I have the past 2 weeks, thanking me for these interviews. And I appreciate that, because everyone I've been having on, I admire, and they're filled with so much knowledge and information, and they've accomplished so much, and they've done so much that I want to draw it out. And at the end of every interview, I'm like, I could have done such a better job. But then he sent these nice notes. But you just heard from David Bereit, the founder of 40 Days for Life. Go to his website, lifebeyondrow.com, and look through all of the different leaders. You can listen to all of them, or you can, like I'm going to go right now when I get off the show, and listen to Hadley Arkes, because Hadley Arkes wrote a book called First Things that I read in college as a young atheist, an Ayn Rand objectivist. And his book, First Things, is what led me to becoming a theist, and then eventually a Christian, and then a Catholic. So I used to tell Hadley, you're the Jew that made me a Catholic, and now he's Catholic. So I really can't say that. All right, until next time. And by next time, I mean tomorrow. This has been another episode of The Jason Jones Show.
This has been The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.